Tonight, our main speaker is Tom. Please help me welcome Tom to the stage.
Hey guys, my name's Tom. I'm an alcoholic. Man, I'm glad to be here right now. I'm lucky to be here. I've had a couple brushes with death, and God saw fit to let me stay here. So I'll start by what it was like. Boy, I like to drink and use everything. The only thing I liked better than my dope was your dope. I loved your dope. Whatever you had, I loved it. And I loved all of it. And I like to snort it. I like to smoke it. I like to drink it. I like to shove it. Whatever, man. I liked it wherever, as often as I could. The one thing that I did hate was reality. I hated sobriety. I hated being sober. At about 13, I started huffing accelerants, and I would use solar cane, Bactine spray and solar cane, and I would huff. I would spray into the cap and hit that. And so that was like amyl nitrate poppers. I don't know if you've ever had those at a bar or whatever, but so I liked dope. I liked angel dust. I liked acid. But you know, it started with alcohol at a young age, and it ended with alcohol when I was 36 years old. So the main point that I want to make out is that alcohol was the main problem in my life. You know, I could be stranded on a desert island, and if a bale of marijuana came floating up, I'd be happy. I'd smoke weed. But I'd be sitting there, and if a coconut fell and hit me in the head, and I smelled that coconut and found out that it was fermented coconut water and it would get me fucked up, I would be drinking coconuts. Believe me, I would be drinking until I was sick. So it started with alcohol. It ended with alcohol. At 36, what happened? At 36, it stopped working. I could not get drunk enough to shut off my committee. And I tried every combination of things, and I could not shut up my committee. That committee that started when I was probably about 8 years old, because I was raised by alcoholics, so I was neurotic. I was afraid. I was raised in a terror-induced environment as a young child. And my dad would ask me questions, and it would be a loaded question, and I had to come up with the right answer. I mean, at 7, 8 years old, and if I didn't have the right answer, there was going to be hell to pay. And so I learned really young to come up with an answer when I was asked for an answer, but as much as I could, I tried to be a chameleon and blend in with my environment so my dad would never make eye contact with me because I was driven by so much fear. And I carried that fear all through my life. I worked 39 years doing motion picture set construction, and I had a great career. I loved my job. I built all kinds of neat spaceships and boats and airplanes and homes and buildings, and I just had a blast doing it. So what it was like was that I used a lot, and what happened is that it stopped working, and I was screwed. And I was at that jumping off place that the book talks about, where you can't live with alcohol and you can't live without it. You're just kind of fucked. You just can't live because you're in a constant state of agitation. And I'll tell you, I have a couple theories about that. I work now. I work with a lot of sponsees. I sponsor quite a few people, close to a dozen. I sponsor one in Beijing, China, and we do it via the internet. So he emails me his answers to the questions on the steps, and I email back my answers to those same questions, and we check out our data and we progress that way. We've gone through he's coming up on 5 years sober right now. So if you're ever in anywhere, and I don't care where it is in this world, he called me about 5 years ago, almost 5 years ago. So it was August 3rd, 5 years ago, and he said, Tom, I'm in trouble. I'm in Beijing and I'm in trouble. And I had spoken with him. He came to my house 6 months before that, and he spent some time with me. And I said, so tell me, Alex, what's it like when you use? And he said, oh, man, because he's a jazz drummer. So he's like, oh, I do a set, and then they want me to snort something in between sets and smoke a little something and then drink a little something, and then I play another set, you know. And so there's always shit around him, always alcohol, but some other chemicals too. And I said, you know, Alex, you sound like a fucking junkie. And his chin hit his chest, and he's like, nobody's ever talked to me like that before. And I said, well, I just, you know, you sound like you use like I do, and I know I'm a fucking junkie, so you sound like a fucking junkie. And so that was February, 5 years ago, and in August 4th, he'll have 5 years. It took 6 months, and he called me from Beijing and said, I'm in trouble. Man, my life's just a wreck, and I'm hating my life, and God, I just can't stop fucking using. Just like you said, man, I'm just in trouble, and it's not working. And what should I do? And I happened to be in my chair, and I took my iPad and went, AA meetings, Beijing, China. Boom, go. 10 seconds, I had a meeting directory list for Beijing, China. So if you can get meeting directory in Beijing, China, believe me, you can get it in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, or Macon, Georgia, or, you know, Sioux Falls, South Dakota. I don't care where you are. Moscow, Russia. So wherever you go, just realize that if you get into trouble with your shit machine and you start talking yourself into maybe thinking it's a good idea to get a drink, or maybe you're talking yourself that I don't need meetings anymore, I'm okay. Get your ass to a meeting. And I don't care where you are. I've been in Los Doce Pasos meetings in Puerto Rico, San Juan, Puerto Rico, all over the island of Puerto Rico, actually. And in Mexico, I've been in meetings up in Alaska. I've been to meetings all over the United States. I traveled a lot. So wherever you go, there is recovery if you want it. If you don't want it, there's nothing any of us can do. You're on your own. You know, Jerry and I, my buddy Jerry, we spend a lot of time at juvenile hall. I've been having some trouble making it for the last 7 months or so. I had maybe a little bit more since September. I had a knee replacement, a full knee replacement in September. I had another one in December. And then what it's like now, we're coming to that, and I'm going to tell you what happened. What happened is I have a lot of fun in my life. I fly fish. I ride horses a lot. I usually ride horses 5 days a week. I love being on horseback. I do a lot of recovery meetings. I work with a lot of sponsees. I stay on the firing line, and I try and fish as much as I can. I fish with a rod and reel. I also fish with a fly rod. But that's my real passion, is fishing. And I was fishing up on the Colorado River on April 26th this year. I had fished the 24th and the 25th up there. I camped for 3 days up a river, and I had a stroke along the bank of the Colorado River, 9 miles from my truck, and I was in my boat. And I had a stroke, and I couldn't walk. And so my world has changed in the last 2 months. That was a little bit more than 2 months ago, coming up on 9 weeks ago. And I found out yesterday. I went to a neurologist here. I spent 5 days in ICU in Flagstaff, and then I went for a week in rehab in Prescott Valley, Mountain Valley Rehab and Health Spa, I call it. But they don't really call it that. They just call it Mountain Valley Rehab. But it's pretty nice. And I spent a weekend there, and at some point I had another stroke. So I found out yesterday. And I think that I've had 2 more strokes since then. So I talked to my neurologist yesterday. I'll go in Tuesday for more tests. I'll get 2 more CAT scans with resonance done on Tuesday to find out what the hell's going on. Because I had a bleed up in my cerebellum, the lower part of my brain, which controls my large and small motor, my speech, and my vision. And then now I've had a couple down on my lower part, down near my spinal cord, some sort of other stroke. So I'm still having some problems. So my life's changed. Does that mean I go out and buy a bag of weed and maybe an ounce of cocaine and a 30-pack of Budweiser and a big bottle of Cuervo? I don't think that would solve the problem that I have right now. I don't think so. I've got double vision. What that means to me is you girls, you look twice as good as you used to look, okay? And you guys are fucking twice as ugly as you were before, all right? So I'm doing vision therapy for my eyes. Perhaps you've heard of Lumosity, which is a program you can get on the internet, which is about exercising your brain and challenging you mentally. So I'm doing Lumosity to challenge my brain so that I can keep functioning. I wasn't able to walk 8 weeks ago, and now I can stand on one foot, and a lot of times I can go all the way around the clock on one foot and balance and on either foot. I used to be a semi-professional surfer. I surfed big waves, and balance was my key deal. I surfed waves 3 times as tall as this highest part of this room, and that's what I loved. So I love adrenaline, so that's why I come to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I just wanted to come to Alcoholics Anonymous and have you guys teach me how I could drink like a normal man. That's all. I just wanted to drink like a normal man. I wanted to be able to go out socially and not end up like dancing with every biker's wife, that came through Prescott. But I couldn't do it. I would end up dancing with all their wives and waking up with strange people in strange places all the time, looking for my clothes, looking for my car, looking for my keys. I couldn't find anything. Now I don't have to do that. I came here hoping you guys would teach me how to drink like a normal man. And what you did is you taught me how to act like a loving and tolerant and kind human being. So that's what I try and do with my sponsees, is be an example of how when they call, if I can't answer the phone, I tell them to leave me a message, or don't even leave me a message, because I've got, missed calls will show up on my iPhone. I've got a smartphone. Even though my brain is like oatmeal now, I've got a smartphone. But you guys have taught me how to live. How to live a life that's just fantastic. For you new guys, you new people, keep coming back. You're the lifeblood of Alcoholics Anonymous. Without you, we die as a society. We need you. That's why Jerry and I go to juvenile hall, and we spend time with these 15, 16, and 17-year-old kids. And we plant the seed of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's all we do. We're like Johnny Appleseed, man, and we got a little basket full of seeds of Alcoholics Anonymous, and we read out of the big book to them, and we sprinkle these seeds around juvenile hall. And in 5.5 years of doing it, every other Saturday, I've had one success. I spoke at the Prescott Valley Friday night speaker meeting a couple years ago, and I had a little girl come up, and I saw her after I spoke. I saw her from about 25 foot away, and I looked at her, and she's like this, and I said, "I know you." She said, "Well, yeah, you're my juvie dude." And I said, "Hope." And she came running up and put my arms around me, 15 years old. She was a year and a month sober. Her dad had been sober 9 months now. One success story out of 5.5 years. We don't go there for the success stories. We go there to spread the word of Alcoholics Anonymous. That if you, and the seed is the same for all of y'all. I don't care where you are. If you need a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, you need a buddy, you need somebody to go to coffee with, talk to, share with, go to a meeting. And I don't care where you are. Just go. We'll go out to coffee with you. We'll probably buy you a burger and a Coke if you want. So, what do I think is the main problem? Well, it's funny that you should ask, because the book is pretty clear on it. The book says on page 62 that selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of all of our troubles. Driven by 100 forms of fear and self-delusion, we step on the toes. Self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity. We step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. Sometimes they hurt us, seemingly without provocation. But we invariably find that at some time in the past, we have made decisions based on self that have placed us in a position to be hurt. So we are so worried about us. And Alcoholics Anonymous teaches me that it's not about me. It's not about me having a stroke and poor me, maybe I ought to sit in a chair and maybe I shouldn't have sponsees anymore or go to juvie on Saturday morning with Jerry. We'll meet at 10:15 at the Maverick and go together. Maybe I shouldn't have to do that now. That's what my brain would have me do. But Alcoholics Anonymous has told me it's not about me, it's about you. It's about you. Are you getting sober? Are you getting what you need? Do you need to stay and talk a little bit after the meeting? Grab me on my way out. I'll be happy to spend whatever time you need. I'll give you my phone number. I give my number out all the time. If you need somebody to call, call me. I'll answer my phone. If I don't answer my phone, either leave me a message or just leave your number. I'll dial it back. I'll call you back as soon as I can, because I do a lot of stuff. There's also a couple other things. A little farther down that page it says this is the how and why of it. First of all, we had to quit playing God. That is so important. The next page, on page 64, talks about another problem area for us. It says resentment is the number one offender. Resentment is the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. From it stem all forms of spiritual disease. So you may not think that driving on your way to work and flipping off this motherfucker that just cut you off is a resentment, but it is. It's a small resentment. But the big book here, what they tell me is that is spiritual disease. That cuts me off from the sunlight of the Spirit. From it stem all forms of spiritual disease. For we have been not only mentally and physically ill, we have been spiritually sick. When the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. That's why in the promises it says, well, it's not necessarily on the promises. I believe it's on, and I'm guessing 86. It's the bottom of page 84. It says we have ceased fighting anything and anyone, even alcohol. For by this time sanity will have returned. That's a promise. On page 85, I'm just going to tell you, there's 3 more promises there. You think that just the promises are on wherever the promises are, 68, 9 or whatever. Page 85 has one. It says, we will see that our new attitude toward liquor has been given us without any thought or effort on our part. That's a promise. It also says, instead, the problem has been removed. It does not exist for us. Speaking about alcohol, there is no obsessiveness anymore. It's been removed. That's a promise. The next paragraph down says there's another promise. We are not cured of alcoholism. What we have is what we really have is a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. Every day is a day when we must. There's not very many times where it says we must, but we must carry the vision of God's will into all our activities. So it's not like, I think maybe you might want to think about carrying your God's will into all your activities. It says you must. You've got to, or you will surely die. There's another place in here that talks about resentment on page 86. It is plain that a life which includes deep resentment leads only to futility and unhappiness. To the precise extent that we permit these, do we squander the hours that might have been worthwhile. I just love studying the Big Book. I'm in another 12-step program now. They call it Al-Anon. And I've never studied the Big Book as much as I do now that I've been 3.5 years in Al-Anon. If you've never tried it, it's been a phenomenal breakthrough for me spiritually. So what is my main problem in life? It's that I'm not connected to a spirit of the universe. I feel alone, and then I get resentful, and I feel alone, and I'm pissed off because I'm alone, and yet I do things and I say things to you to make sure that you walk away from me and I stay alone. And then I get resentment at you, and I justify that anger towards you when really I set the whole thing in motion by not being spiritually fit. I know that quoting the book is kind of, maybe not your favorite thing to do, but it says on the bottom of page 86, and I'm going to do it anyways because if you haven't heard it, you need to hear it. And remember, you heard it here first. On page 86 at the bottom, it talks about a lot of stuff on page 86. It talks about our 10th step and our 11th step. It talks about an awakening. Let us think about the 24 hours ahead. We consider our plans for the day before we begin. We ask God to direct our thinking, especially asking that it be divorced from self-pity, dishonest, or self-seeking motives. The next paragraph down says, in thinking about our day, we may face indecision. We may not be able to determine which course to take. Here we ask God for inspiration, an intuitive thought, or a decision. We relax and take it easy. So throughout the day, it doesn't say just in the morning and just at night, and, I got nothing better to do, the fish aren't biting, maybe I ought to talk to God. Well, maybe you ought to talk to God before you even lace up your fly rod. And then maybe you'll catch some nice fish. Or if you don't, maybe you'll just have a good time with a buddy. Or maybe you'll make a new friend. I make new friends everywhere. There's a lot here. It talks about on page 87, I know the bottom of it is one of my favorites. It says, as we go through our day, we pause when agitated or doubtful. We ask for the right thought or action. We constantly remind ourselves that we are no longer running the show, humbly saying to ourselves many times each day, thy will be done. If you're having trouble on this journey of Alcoholics Anonymous and you haven't fully committed, perhaps you're sitting out there and you know you're an alcoholic, but you still haven't kind of held up your hand and said, hey, my name's Joe and I'm an alcoholic. You know, when you can, do it. And when you do it, there will be people, if you ask us for our phone numbers, we'll be happy to give it. This is the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. I've had a storybook life. I'm really struggling right now after seeing my neurologist yesterday. I've been very spiritual for the last 3.5 years, and for 2 months now I had this stroke, and it cut me off from my spiritual journey. So I've had to redouble, and re-triple my efforts now. I can't just do it several times a day. I have to do it throughout the day. And I have to seek Him. I have to look for Him. I call Him a Him. It could be Mother Nature. I don't care what you call this spirit of the universe. My little pet name for Him is Cosmo. Because He made the cosmos. He made all the galaxies and all the universes and all the worlds and all the stars. He made it all. That's my guy, Cosmo. And he's cool. He loves to surf big waves. He loves to go stand, I say, nutsack deep in a trout stream. He loves it. He loves to fly fish. He loves to backpack. He loves to hunt. He loves to laugh. He loves to sit with newcomers and go through the steps and watch them over the period of a year. Watch them come out of their shell and start laughing again. Because I don't know about you, but when I got here, I hadn't laughed in years. And I had about 30 days. I was sitting back there in the cheap seat somewhere. And some guy at the podium said something funny, man, and I heard this laughter. And I looked left and right to see where it was coming from. And it was coming from me. And it was coming from down here deep in my stomach. And I hadn't laughed like that in years. I would just laugh like when you tripped and fell, and it would be like, right? It was a snicker or a sneer. It was terrible. But I laugh now. I love to laugh. And Sponsees and I, we get together. And they might come over and we might not talk about the book at all. We might not talk about their step at all. We might just catch up on what's happening. What's happening? Why? Because now I know. I can go up to any one of you. Congratulations, you on your 1 year. That's fantastic. Marty, 13. It's great, man. I watched you come in. Fantastic. Do this thing. This is the greatest thing. I've had a great life, but this is the greatest of all gifts I've ever been given, was this book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And if you haven't read it, the program of recovery is in the first 164 pages. There's a lot of good stuff. I could go on for hours, literally hours, and not be bored. But I only had 40 minutes. So thank you all for letting me share with you tonight.
Thank you, Tom. This has been a regular meeting of the Rarely Group of Alcoholics Anonymous. You are cordially invited to join us again next week. Please bring a friend. There are approximately, after the prayer, will the people who volunteered to do that stuff, and your court cards are in the back corner with Kirk. Let's circle up and say the Lord's Prayer. Thank you all for coming.